cinema is a narrative art, and even documentary is a narrative art of some sort. But it is different from literature and theater in one way. And the important thing is, it uses a mechanical device to capture reality. It's not like painting, where manually you reproduce reality by through paint and through, or in theater where you actually get actors to act out the reality in some way. But it is actually put together by reality in the sense of the mechanical device captures reality, and the bits of reality which are recorded on film are then used to narrate. Okay, so
Yeah.
since it is constituted by reality, it can be said to particularly be suited to mimesis. Now, I assume that you have some sense about mimesis. Mimesis is basically the imitation of the world. What the world appears like, it's an imitation of the world. All art generally is supposed to belong to by mimetic at its very roots. Okay. Now, what are the earliest arts? The art that is visible to the human beings. What is the earliest art? Which is, it's obviously cave paintings, right?
Yes.
You know what are cave paintings, right? Of animals, of this. Even there, they were actually painting in some way. They were creating pictures of animals, pictures of people hunting, all that. Now, what exactly was the reason of that? Was that art? It wasn't art as we understand the term. It seemed the general belief is that it a kind of ritual way of gaining control over nature, right? So nobody really knows why man began to imitate nature, but that seemed to be the basis by which mimesis in art produced. Okay, that is to gain control over nature in some way by imitating it, by imitating its appearance. That seemed to be the basic thing. Okay, that has continued in some way. Okay, now you can say that that is ritual component.
I'd like to interrupt you
Yeah,
once.
please.
I'd like to interrupt you once. This idea that it was about gaining control over nature by imitating nature, but
Yeah.
then when it comes to the artistic expression of that same thing, and like people starting to find their own voices while doing it
Yeah.
as an idea. So
Yeah.
how, like, where does this contradiction come from? Like,
No, see,
it's
it came very much later. Like for example, let's take this. You don't mind my answering questions then and there? Okay. See, the question is this entire business of the author, the painter, person who produces art, is a very much later concept, right? Even if you take art, say 800, 900 AD, 1000 AD, 1200 AD, art was still religious in some way, right? It was religious. It was not basically as the artist in that sense. He was a painter. He was not expressing himself. He was sort of paying a tribute to God in some way. He was painting, Christ in some way. But the basic thing is mimesis. This entire thing of the artist being important is a much later concept. Okay, it's just like music, right? How did music begin? Music began in prayer, right? Okay. It began in prayer in some way so that it could be memorized. It began with some kind of religious ideal, but later on it became music, it became something else. So this entire thing of turning something into art, as you understand the term, is a later thing. The earliest thing, there was no artist in that sense. Even now you go to villages, there are craftsmen, there are artists. Craftsmen are not aware that they are producing art. But it's difficult to tell the difference between craft and art, right? You get my
true,
point.
true.
Okay. Is that okay with you?
Yes, sir. Please
Okay,
continue.
all right. Okay, good. I would like you to ask me questions like this so it livens up the matter. Okay, right. Now, once you start this business of imitation, right? Imitation of the world, how does one imitate? How does one imitate the world? Okay. First of all, one must be selective, one must distort, okay, one must allow a subjective element to creep into your whatever, into your portrayal. Okay, you must have a perspective upon the world, because what the reason is that the world is nothing in itself without the observer. The observer must be brought into the world in some way. So the question is that element of subjectivity must come in. Okay, now this is very important. So result of this, when when the Méliès side of it and the Lumiere side of it developed into cinema, okay, you had three main elements in narrative cinema. One is the capture of reality, which is simply the record of what is in front of the camera. Okay, then there was the Authorial subjectivity. What the author by distortion wants to make of this reality, right? His version of that reality. Authorial, you can call it authorial expressivity. The third, okay, is what you call character subjectivity. It is not how the author sees it, but some person who's the character in the film sees it. What you would call POV or point of view, right? So the question is, if you look at movies, there is a certain distortion, like for example, dream sequences. What are dream sequences, right? Dream sequences are basically some kind of thing of the character dreaming, right? It's not the author dreaming, it's the character dreaming. So dream sequences would be included in this thing of character subjectivity. So these are basically the three components of cinema, right? Okay, all cinema should be, by and large, narrative cinema composed of three components. Okay. Now, when you actually go around trying to make movies, this thing of record and thing, there are actually one is called two elements. One is called mise en scène and one is called montage. Right? Mise en scène is a French
Yes.
word. It's called putting in the scene. It means MISE dash EN dash scene SCENE. Okay, mise en scene. Okay, you could call it mise en scene. That's the way it's written. So mise en scène is what exactly? Okay, it is simply the it is simply the set design, the location, the actors, what is in front of the camera, what the camera catches. Okay, it was not only reality, it includes stuff like artificial sets, it would include whatever is put in place in front of the camera and caught by the camera. That is mise en scène. Montage, that creates meaning of some sort, right? Okay, if you catch a stage play, if you catch a stage play, that entire thing is caught in one thing, you only got mise en scène. Okay. Montage is what? Montage is making meaning by juxtaposition. One image with another image. Okay. Now there are various ways in which this editing, this what is called editing is montage. Okay, these are all French words. The French were among the first to theorize. Therefore, you
So
have,
the
yeah, please, you want to ask
juxtaposition,
something? Yeah,
yes, sir.
please.
The juxtaposition that you're talking about, isn't that just one form of montage? Because there are many montages that just
Yeah, correct.
have no
All the
juxtaposition.
question
But
is,
yeah,
yeah, correct. See, of course, you've got various kinds. One is your American invisible style, which you're simply delivering the story. Then you've got your Russian style, which is actually some kind. I won't go into that now. I'll go into it tomorrow or day after. And this is giving you a basic thing. I'll talk about it later. Okay, this I won't talk about
yes,
it
sir.
now. There are different schools of reasons for editing. The simplest one is called the invisible style, which Hollywood came up with. Okay, which is simply to convey the story without interference, because putting two or three images together, okay, will not give you meaning, right? It's like speech. Now, words, there has to be syntax, right? When you speak to people, there has to be syntax. If I say I'm talking to you, you will understand it. If I say talk, me. If I say that, you. If I say that, okay, the word is not organized properly. Okay, for you to understand what I am saying, the words have to be organized properly. That is called syntax. There is certain grammar, right? It's the same thing with cinema. It has a certain grammar. So the question is, this montage is the way you use the cut, you use the dissolve, you use the close up, you use the zoom. All these are constitute the elements like the verb, the adverb, the noun. Okay, the preposition is the way of bringing all these things together, right? So all these things constitute syntax in cinema, right? So the point is that montage in these creates syntax in cinema, so you can understand the American system, which is the easiest way, which is the most, shall we say, effective one. The reason that American cinema is the most effective kind of cinema in many ways is it's intended as a commercial enterprise. The first, in fact, cinema began more as art when the Americans took over, it became as a commercial enterprise. It was necessary for people to follow, right? So the question is the invisible style, where the author is pushed aside, the author is simply delivering the story, is that easiest kind of editing, right? Is that point okay?
Yes, sir.
The basic thing. Okay. Now, as I said, expressivity can be done through one is through mise en scène and montage, right? Montage expressivity would be the Russians in some way, not so much the Americans, also in a smaller way. But the Russians, like you look at Mother, I would suggest that you see Mother before the next class. You look at Pudovkin's Mother. I think it was 1920 something. You look at
1926. Yeah. So
26.
guys, just look it up. It's available
Yeah,
on YouTube. It's a
yeah,
Soviet film called Mother by Podovkin, and
Pudovkin.
yeah, we'll share the link as well when we
Yeah,
put
you
this
also
out.
look at to understand what invisible style is. You also look at Griffiths, D.W. Griffiths, Birth of a Nation. Okay, that's also there on YouTube. You have a look at that. This is the basic thing. You're already film students. You already have seen these movies. This would be interesting. Not that these movies are very. I mean, you can see the complete differences between the kind of the kind of expressivity you have in Birth of a
True.
Nation, which is invisible, and the thing you have in Mother, which is completely different kind of expression, different kind of editing. Okay, you only hearing about the differences not enough. You see it, then you realize the whole thing, right? Then there is third film you can also see called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is mise en scène as expressive. That is the set
German
design
expressionism.
itself is sorry.
German expressionism, right?
Yeah, expressionism. But all of them are expressionist. See, all of them are expressionist in the sense. See, expressionism has two different meanings. One is simply as expression, right?
Yeah.
On Bazin, the critic, I don't want to go into that now, said that the Russian cinema, which the Russians called realistic, was expressionist. That is, they were basically expressing themselves and not really recording reality. And the ideal thing, mise en scène, because it is simply record of reality, is realism, right? Once you bring in montage in some way, of course, it's essential to bring in montage, but you start using montage to express, like the Russians did, especially Pudovkin, Eisenstein, it becomes expressionist. But the expressionist in a different sense from the set design of this cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where the expression is in the mise en scène. It is not in the montage. Okay. Okay. Now we come to the three systems which define narration in cinema. One is space, one is time, one is causality. Okay, these are the three things. In the Aristotelian scheme, space is continuous. That is, the whole world is single space, and there are various devices which are used to make this explicit. Are you aware of this 180 degrees axis of action thing? That is, action is always on one side of
One side
the
of the act.
camera is always on
Yeah.
one side of the action, right?
Or
This
one side
is
of the
all
act.
of you, anybody who knows film, is the first thing you will learn. Now the thing is, it's almost like like a dogma because you mustn't confuse. Now, for example, if a spaceship is going from Earth to the Moon, okay,
Yeah.
if it is going from right to left, and that is the spaceship traveling to the Moon, when it returns from the Moon, it will have to be from left to right. Okay. Now this entire thing of right and left and all is no meaning when you actually deal with such distances. But in order to not to prevent confusion in the minds of the spectator, you do it so that the basis seems to be theater. That is theatrical action. The audience is on this side of on one side of the thing, on third wall or fourth wall or whatever it's called. It is that fourth wall which is the basis of this. But this 180 degree axis of action is sort of a basic dogma in cinema. If you don't follow this, you will confuse. You will confuse the spectator. That is the basic thing. Then you've got this thing of the eye line match, right? Within a scene.
Yes, sir.
That is, if A is looking at B and B is looking back, you will have to do it in such a way that the eye line match is there. If he is looking from the top right hand corner and looking in this direction and speaking to B, then when B responds, B will have to be looking from the bottom left hand corner and looking back. That is called the eye line match. This is a well-known thing. That also you will know about it. If you don't have this, we will not know where people are positioned in relation to each other. Then you've got this thing of catching the totality of the space first and then zeroing in on details. It's another thing. Or you can begin with the detail and then go into the thing and capture the totality of the space, right? Then you've got this thing of year line match, which is if some person is sitting there and you hear footsteps, right? Obviously in a cinema theater, you don't know which direction the footsteps are coming from. When you hear the footsteps, he turns to the right. That means that person who is coming will have to approach from the right. So these are all methods used to make sure that the action, the meaning of the action is caught by everybody, the story is caught by everybody. This is basically to establish continuity, okay? This is as
Yes.
far as space is concerned. I would suggest here that you have a look at the way the space is in the opening scene from Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. It is in
Yes, sir.
made in 1960. It's also available on YouTube. Okay, you will the opening scene from Psycho. First 5 minutes are available on the thing. You can have a look at it, and
So
that
someone
will
has
tell
a
you.
question.
Yeah,
Someone
please.
has a question.
Yeah, please.
He asks that. So what exactly is the fourth wall? What does the fourth wall exactly mean?
Fourth wall means that when the stage thing is there, right? What is the stage? It's got three walls, right?
Yeah.
It's got three walls. The action takes place in this confined area between the three walls, right? You got that? So the fourth wall is the thing which is separating them from the spectator, right? There is no wall there actually. They imagine there's a wall and you are not supposed to be, you're supposed to be watching, but you're on this side of the wall, you're watching them, right? They are acting as if there's a fourth wall, right? So so the entire thing will be confined in the three walls. So you as a spectator on this are on this side of the imaginary fourth wall. Okay. So that what you do does not impinge upon what they are doing. You're just watching, right? That is the fourth wall. You got that? Did you
Yeah.
get that? Okay, I
Yes, sir.
assume you
Please
got it.
continue.
Okay. It's a fairly simple thing. So the question is that same philosophy is followed in your, yeah, he can look, but he's not staring into the audience. Somebody asked here. Yeah, he's breaking the fourth wall, but he's not breaking it in the sense of acknowledging the audience. Okay, but there are some kinds of theater like your Brechtian theater and all that, where they try to break this. Where actually Badal Sarkar's plays, they actually do this. People will get onto the stage, they try to break that fourth wall. I'm talking about conventional theater, what is called proscenium theater. Normally, that fourth wall is an imagined thing. They normally don't break it, but it's possible to break it. That's one of the politically, shall we say, radical kind of theatre. They try to break the thing to involve the audience in some way. They've done it. Not that they haven't done it, but this is a fundamental
Okay.
proscenium theatre. This is the thing. The thing is that everything takes place within the confines of the three walls, and the fourth wall is the imagined wall, yes, apart from the audience. Okay. Now, you just watch the Psycho. It's a film you should watch. Psycho is an interesting thing. You need not see the whole film. The whole film you can see at some other point. Just as I've been using this example in previous sessions also. Psycho will give you the opening scene of Psycho will tell you how space is established in theatre. This is whatever I've talked about now, right? Now we come to the second thing, which is time. Okay, this is and the basic thing of time is it's universal time, right? It is universal time, which is that it follows the clock. Like you believe there's universal time, whatever is happening here, whatever I'm talking to you is happening. You're watching me. Even if you weren't watching me, there'd be something happening in your room simultaneously with this, right? So you believe that there's one thread of time and so there are simultaneous things happening, right? Now, if any students of physics are there, you know
Yeah.
that the simultaneity is an illusion, right? In some sense, like for example,
True.
for example, in a different galaxy, you cannot, for instance, say that just when we are talking now in a galaxy some thousand light years away, simultaneously something is happening makes no sense. But when movies use this like Star Wars, you will say long, long ago in a galaxy far, far
And
away,
it's
right?
far, far away.
Yeah, so that is the opening line of Star Wars,
Oh,
which is actually it has no meaning at all. But the point is in the context of our thing of simultaneity, of single thread of time, that has some meaning, right? Okay.
yes, sir.
So normally the way you think is two elements are very important. Three elements: chronology, duration. Okay, are very important. Two elements, right? What is chronology? It is the ordering of events in time, right? It's the ordering of events in time. What came before what? And duration is the length of the action, right? It's the length of the action from between the first event in the story to the last event in the story. Is the time taken for the action to unfold in a story is called the duration, right?
Yes,
Now,
sir.
it's very important. This duration is very important. Normal thing would be in Hollywood films. The normal thing would be to deal with calendar, clock would be the thing. Then they started using things like appointments and deadlines. See, supposing I tell you, right, I meet you 1 month later. Let's meet 1 month later at 3 o'clock. So when you meet at 3 o'clock 1 month later, say, what is this? This September 9th, 2020 at 4:30. Okay, you say that, right? Which
Yes.
means when you meet at that particular time, that 1 month has taken place. Exactly, that is the way. That is a deadline. There is an appointment and a deadline. Okay, you take an appointment, right? Now this is the fundamental thing. One other thing is important, which is that you use, for example, you use historical markers. There are historical events. For example, there are key historical events which everybody is aware of. Now, supposing you say 1945. Oh, what is 1945? What is 1945? How is it important? Can you tell me? Okay.
World War Two
How is
ending.
1945 important historically? End of World War II, right? So
World War Two, yeah.
people are coming in the street, there are streamers, people are waving and all that, soldiers are coming back, and you have some action there. You know that the action is based on the fact that the war has ended, it's an optimistic period, you have to start afresh, some sort of thing, right? That is the basis by which you fix the you fix the time thing, historical time. This is important, but that's another historical marker. Okay.
Yeah.
These are important. Simultaneity, causality, simultaneity, chronology, duration, and yeah, basically because of universal time. Now you come to the next one, which is very important, which is causality. Okay, which is the ordering of causes and effects between events. Okay, now Hollywood uses individual motivation and uses this chain of causes and effects as a chain. If you remove one, the whole chain will collapse. I'll give you an example from Spider-Man, important film which everybody would have seen. The very first Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, right? Now, what
Yeah,
is
Sam Raimi.
Spider-Man? How does he work? What is Spider-Man? Spider-Man is a 90-pound weakling. He's in love with Mary Jane. Mary Jane doesn't know he exists. Okay? Now look how causality operates. So what does he do?
He,
He doesn't know she
he,
exists.
yeah,
What does he do? He falls in love with her, and he's trying to pursue her in a museum, right? He's trying to take a picture of her, and because he's trying to take a picture of her, accidentally a spider falls on him and bites him, right?
yeah,
Because the spider falls on him and bites him, he becomes super strong, right? Okay. And
yeah,
because he becomes super strong, okay, Mary Jane looks at him. You see how it develops, right? He becomes super strong. That bully is there in school. Accidentally, he bashes up the bully. He draws and then he demonstrates his strength. And when he demonstrates his strength, Mary Jane looks at him and notices him the fact that he has blue eyes, right? Now the
yeah,
point is now Mary Jane looks at him, but Mary Jane, he can't get Mary Jane because he doesn't have a car, right? So then he looks at the car in the advertisements in a newspaper and he finds an I think the $2,000 or some such thing for a car. He doesn't have that money. Then he looks at the thing that there's a wrestling contest. If you can last some 5 minutes or something with somebody, which I forget the man's name, you will you will you will
he'll win the
actually
money.
win
Yeah,
$2,000, right? That's the
yeah,
basic thing, right? So then the point is that he takes this to he fights the man, he defeats the man, and then he goes to get the money. That man who's running the show cheats him of that $2,000, and when he cheats him of the $2,000, and then he can't get that money. He goes away, and when he goes, he is waiting there in the lift or some such thing, and the robber comes and robs that man of money and runs out. And because that man has cheated him, what the robber does is he doesn't intervene. Peter Parker does not intervene with the robber, and the robber takes the money and rushes out, right? So Peter Parker keeps quiet. The policeman comes and you could have got him. The chap says, it isn't my problem, is what he says, right? That is
yeah,
because that man said it's not my problem. Now Peter
yeah,
Parker goes out. Just see how these things are linked, okay? Peter Parker goes out and he finds that robber has killed his uncle, right? So Peter Parker sees that his uncle is dead because of all this chain of events and realizes his hand in it and he decides to fight crime. Okay, that's the way it works. The point is you can't remove any of these things from here. If you remove any of these things from here, the whole chain will just collapse. Got it?
Yes, sir.
Right? This is the way. Now, causality is very important. It is it works like a chain, and that is the way this thing would go along. Okay. Now we come to Indian cinema, right? Now, Indian cinema did not begin with the documentary, nor did it begin with the fantasy film. It began with the mythological, right? This is interesting. Now, mythological films are not fantasies. Okay, they are not to be confused with fantasies. They are not fantasies. In fact, Palke described these films as realistic. He said they were giving manifestation to what everybody knew as real. Rama is real, Krishna is real, Harishchandra is real. This is all mythology. This is not what we call mythology. He took as real. It's there in our hearts. It's the truth in our hearts, and therefore, the whole thing is it's not. It's a manifestation of the truth, is what he said. Okay. Now, the important thing is that this thing of the realism is very different kind of realism from the other kind of realism that you're accustomed to. Okay. Now
So,
this basic thing. Yeah.
Abhishek has a question.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
he wants you to tell us about a little bit about the French New Wave.
Oh, that's a little off the. That will come in sooner or later. That much later. French New Wave is 1960, right? That's not part of today's thing. We'll come to it.
Yeah. So,
The whole thing is going to end with
Abhishek,
this. It will come some
we're
point.
still in the inception of cinema.
Yeah, conception. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
ask me
we're
about
still in
David
the
Lynch now, it is very
yeah
difficult for me
inception.
to tell you how will I locate David Lynch in relation to Palke. Will be a bit of a problem, right? So the question is, it will
Yes.
come. I mean, sooner. French New Wave is a much later thing. Okay,
Yeah.
it will come much
Yeah.
later. It will go along sometime. Probably several sessions later. It will come.
Yes. Sir.
Right now, the basic thing is that Palke thought his films are realistic. It is a different meaning of realism. Okay, so please
Yeah.
do not take when you take fantasy, when you take the term fantasy, do not consider the Indian mythological film as fantasy. Right? The biblical epic is not called fantasy. Right? It's not illusion. It is when Ben Hur or whatever Jesus Christ works miracles in a biblical film. It's not fantasy. Right? Fantasy is different. We'll come to that later, right? Now, one of the important things, okay, is that when Indian cinema moved out of the mythological, I think the Hindi film moved out of the mythological in 1942 or so, such thing, I mean, some such thing. It continued in Telugu, it continued in Kannada, it continued in the South Indian languages. But the important thing is, even when it moved out of the thing of the mythological, you started having this thing called the social or whatever, the domestic melodrama. Events take place at the heroic level. Is it possible? Somebody's asked me here.
Yeah.
Is
It
it
is possible
possible to? Yeah, okay. Is it
to
possible?
editing in film.
Can I ask you a question again? Should I ask another
Yeah.
question?
It's he's asking that is it possible to alter the time and space and causality relationship through editing?
It's possible. Shall I give you something? Example? Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. I was just
Pulp
thinking of.
Fiction, right? Pulp Fiction is an example of causality being generally, what exactly is the causality? By editing the chronology in some way, you suggest other kinds of causality, which is really not. I mean, it doesn't do away with. You can't alter the causality. You suggest more than one cause. Okay, you suggest other things because I mean you assume that there's a single causality, but after that other things can be suggested. Something you didn't know before can come in as a cause. Okay, that cause can be given as a later, can be given to you later. Why did this event happen? You're told shown the event first, but later on it's revealed as the cause. So something else is revealed as the cause. Okay, shall I
and
continue?
Luku Morang. So this, and also like I would like to add to that point. This has been done right from the beginning. Like say, like not the beginning exactly from early stages as well. Because Citizen Kane, I guess, if I'm not wrong, so Citizen Kane was also the first non-linear structured film from Hollywood.
Non-linear uses flashbacks. Non-linear agreed, but it has nothing to do with causality. See,
No,
yeah,
yeah, it was.
causality remains the same.
Yeah,
Okay,
causality remains the same, but
same. Yeah,
as I said, the relationship. yeah, we can
Yeah,
share
please,
the
yeah, we
PPT.
will share. Don't worry,
We'll
share
share
the
the PPT.
PPT with you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the causality of that whole film, like it was about finding what Rosebud is,
Yeah, no, no,
and
wait a minute. Causality of the film is this. This boy, his childhood is interrupted when his mother comes into money and he's sent to, so the
which is
question
the
is
oh
what
yeah,
happens to him?
which
That is
propels
the
the action of the
causality of
film.
the film, right?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, the point is that that causality is revealed in different stages. It's revealed at different points. It doesn't mean that the causality is pretty clear what is, but it comes to you together at a much later stage. Okay. Look, it is
yeah,
not that
it's
the
not
causality
altered.
should
It's
be
not
revealed right
altered.
in a linear fashion. This non-linear thing has nothing to do with causality is always there. I mean, Citizen Kane, the causality of what is the thing which causes Kane to become this is gradually revealed through the different episodes, different stories and that sort of thing. It doesn't mean that the causality is thrown into doubt at any point. That the actually causality is not altered.
Yeah,
Causality can be
causality is not altered.
indefinite, but it's not altered in that sense. What you think was the cause will be replaced by another cause. When you are shown that, see, for example, supposing the John F. Kennedy's assassination, you find a bullet going into him, is killed, and you show the bullet guy who's being thing. Then it turns out that this man has the blanks gun, and somebody is in the shooting. Obviously, that causality has been shall we say, configured, right? You got that. But that means that the original thing was a lie. What you said originally that this man thought was a what do you say, misrepresentation of some sort, right? That is the thing. So causality will not be altered, but causality need not be revealed. Many of the films, the kind of puzzles that people like Tarantino and all this, even Hitchcock also sometimes, is that causality. Hitchcock, for instance, we look at Vertigo. Okay, causality is not so clear, but he gradually comes together and get the whole thing together. So causality could be revealed at the end. It's
Yeah,
not in a street. Something like Spider-Man, it's straight. It's straight.
yeah,
But you could have other films like Pulp Fiction, like Vertigo, which gives you a causality which is revealed little by little and is meant for you to put it together in your head, right? You got it?
yes, sir.
That is the thing, okay? So now the basic thing what Palke was, okay, that Palke did not talk about reality, he talked about the truth. Okay, what you talk about reality, what we talk about reality normally is this thing what you call photographic thing, verisimilitude. What you catch, what the camera catches is reality, right? Palke was talking about something else, which is the truth, which is in our hearts. Okay, giving manifestation what we all know as the truth. Okay, that's slightly different thing from verisimilitude of the camera which catches action in some way, right? That is a completely different thing. Now the point is that after Palke exited, there were new films started coming, and this social also had action at the heroic level. What is heroic level action? What do you mean by heroic level? What do you mean by that?
Heroic level action, where the hero is,
It
like he
means it's a rather
overcomes.
exalted plane. People are exemplars. They are
Yeah,
meant
yeah.
to be.
They're
They're
not the.
exemplars.
Yeah,
They're not
they're
like
not
you and me,
laymen. Yeah,
right?
they're not laymen. Yeah,
They're not like you and me. They're not ordinary people. There's no ordinary person. For example, you look at films made by with Shivaji Ganeshan or your Rajkumar or Rajnikant. Rajnikant can play a poor person. He can't play an ordinary person, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
either a rich guy or
Ordinary
a
is
poor guy.
something else. His emotions are all large. His emotions are, if you want to distinguish between epic emotions, hatred, passion, okay,
Yeah,
then hatred, these are the important things. Jealousy, okay, these are the fundamental anger. These are the basic emotions which you get out of epic narrative. You look at the ordinary narrative, which is in my which is actually from the novel. Okay, ordinary people. What are the feelings like? For example, nervousness. Okay, nervousness would be an emotion for an ordinary person, whereas fear would be for an epic character, right? So the question is, can you have Salman Khan showing nervousness? No. Salman Khan can show fear. He can't show nervousness, right? Nasiruddin Shah can show nervousness. Amol Palekar can show nervousness. Can Amol Palekar show passion? Very doubtful, right? The
yeah,
point is that passion is a very large emotion meant for a certain class of people. Okay, affection, these are milder emotions meant for another character. It's not that a different class of people. They are basically generic representations One comes from the epic, which is your epic with large emotions. The other comes from the novel with small emotions. So this is the basic thing, right? So the question is that, okay, you will not have ordinary people by and large in the epic cinema. When you say epic cinema, I mean the mainstream Hindi cinema, the reformist movies of the 40s, the like for example Mother India. You take Mother India, you take something like Raj Kapoor's Avara. Raj Kapoor is not an ordinary person, by the way. He goes on doing this thing about, he's not an ordinary person. He's actually a kind of hero pretending to be poor or some such thing. His emotions are all large. He mimics the small emotions, but he's basically not those emotions, right? He acts like nervous and all this, but basically when the time comes, he's mimicking those emotions as an ordinary man. He's not really that, okay? Whereas Charlie Chaplin is different. You get me? When Raj Kapoor does Charlie Chaplin imitations, he's not really being a Chaplin character, right? We won't go into that now. I mean, just basic thing is.
But sir, like the films that he did, say for example, the later films as well, like for example, Mera Naam Joker, or
They're all larger
or
than
the
life
early, or
characters.
even the characters are larger than life, but the background and the milieu and the social strata that he puts his characters in.
Meranam Joker, the early part, with the boy, is like somewhat,
Yeah,
yeah, you say novelistic character. Once he becomes, yeah, Meranam Joker, I think was, again, as you say, as you go along in the cinema, you come to somebody like Amir Khan, or you come to somebody like these actors, new actors, right? They do these small characters, right? Okay. They do small people, they
yeah.
do small characters. This is gradually coming in, the distinction is going. I think even in middle cinema, for example, people Rishikesh Mukherjee, all these, they were all doing these small characters. So Raj Kapoor in some way, some kind of, you can call it probably middle ground in some way,
Yeah.
middle ground in some at some point. But I seriously think that Avara it wouldn't be there. I think in my Mera Nam Joker, the early first part of Mera Nam Joker,
Yeah, of course,
probably
like
is yeah. Avara, no, I
films
think.
like Avara is like
Yeah,
the
Ravana is
passion that he
larger than
has,
life.
his
But
singing.
he's trying
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do something. He's trying to do a Chaplin imitation kind of thing. But when the crux comes, like for example, you look at the way a woman touches his feet and all this in Avara, you won't have Chaplin doing that, right?
no.
Okay. You
What
wouldn't
What do
have
you think was
Chaplin
the
character.
reason?
You wouldn't have Chaplin character, the woman coming and touching his feet in a Chaplin character, his heroic thing, his anger, his this and that. The kind of emotion that Raj Kapoor is initially very nervous, starts showing, exhibiting in later parts of Avara are not what Chaplin character would do. The Chaplin character would never
What
become
do you
so
think
heroic
was
at some point. Sorry?
Yes, sir. But sir,
You get my
what
point.
do you think was the reason? What do you think was the reason that he kind of like imitated Chaplin in that sense, but also maintained that larger than life heroic
See, it
persona?
was necessary for him to do this larger than life heroic thing because he was addressing people who were illiterates, right?
Hmm.
Okay, now the point is that this where were we? Raj Kapoor was addressing a public which was very low literacy public, right? So he had to
Yeah.
talk to them in a language which was larger than life, right? It was epic. Automatically, it came epic thing. But he was impressed by Chaplin in some way. He started adopting his mannerisms, showing that nervousness. I don't know if you've seen Andaz, you've seen nervousness and all this. But the situation is when the situation comes. What is this? Okay. Okay. When the situation comes for him to act larger than life, he acts larger than life. Charlie Chaplin maintains that ordinary man thing. Charlie Chaplin is not heroic.
Yeah.
Get me? But Raj Kapoor is heroic. There's a basic difference between these two, between Raj Kapoor and Charlie Chaplin. He's not. He's just imitating some of mannerisms of Charlie Chaplin. He's not really Charlie Chaplin in that sense. Okay. Whereas it would be possible for a new actor to do this, for a newer actor, Nawazuddin Siddiqui or one of these people who are actually playing smaller people, right? Irfan Khan. These people could just play
Yeah.
small people, right? We have a lot of actors now, Rasiduddin Shah, Om Puri, they were playing ordinary people. Om Puri always played ordinary people. Amol Palekar always played ordinary people. Palekar never played an epic hero. He can't play an epic hero. Similarly, Dharmendra can't play an ordinary person. It's very difficult for them to. He tries to in some amount of comedies, but doesn't really work out. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is the thing. Okay, so the question is, okay, that the thing about ordinary people are that these epic heroes are that they're testifying to some universal truth of some sort, right? Okay, that universal truth is some underlying truth. It's a truth which is palpated, Now, of course, these people wear suits, they wear ordinary clothes, they wear everyday clothes, they live in everyday milieu. The truths are basically from the same epic tradition, right? Okay. Now, important thing about mimesis is, as I said, it began with cave painting. Mimesis, one of the fundamental things about mimesis is that the world is inscrutable. You cannot understand the world. Okay, cave paintings were there. Nobody knows the purpose of those cave paintings, but the point is, those cave paintings are evidence of the world being inscrutable. You don't know what the world is about. Now, because the world is inscrutable, when men produce films, when they make movies, the movie is supposed to be complex and inscrutable in many ways. Interpretation becomes the key issue here. Okay, what does this mean? Ambiguity. So the question is,
Yeah.
when you talk about world cinema, great movies are understood and in terms of their ambiguity, complexity, the way in which it mimics the world. So one of the characteristics of the world is it's complex. Okay. Another thing is it's ambiguous. You don't know why things happen, right? You don't
True.
know why things happen. Relationships, you're always speculating. Why did I fail in this examination? Okay. I failed in this examination, as in Satyajit Ray's Janaranya, because some man he borrowed spectacles from somebody else and corrected my paper. As a result of which I failed in their speculation. There's no way you will know that whether somebody borrowed spectacles and you failed. Satyajit Ray, because he's in the position of somebody outside looking at the whole world, is the position of God in some way. He knows that. But the point is this, that everything is speculative, you can only, so the question is, you don't know. The point is, so Mimes says, because it has to replicate the world in some way, it must be complex, it must be ambiguous, it must give up, it must, I mean, ideally, the great films are, if you look at some film like Renoir's Rules of the Game, you look at something
Yeah.
like, okay, all these are ambiguous films, by and large, complex, ambiguous are the fundamental virtues, right?
But the rules of the game was a like the ambiguity of rules of the game is not as like it's not expressionistic in that sense that we normally associate the
Expressionistic elements
typical
are
ways of
there in the film, but you wouldn't be
they are, but
expressionistic in,
yeah,
yeah, not in
but
the
in
German sense,
yeah, not in the
not in the
like in the
Caligari
sense,
sense.
yeah, not in the
There
Caligari
is
sense,
there
and
is a
also it's a
worldview there, right? It is his world. Renoir is creating this world. His relationship between the servant and the master is obviously not there. It is for him to. It's part of his. He does it through mise en scène, right? But the question is how he does
yeah.
it, how the relationships are there, how the acting takes place, how the characters are drawn. All these are expressionistic. Expressionists, they express in some way. Let's not get confused with this. That Caligari is only one form of expression, right?
No,
All
what I
kinds of
meant,
expression. Vertigo, for instance.
what I
Okay.
meant the ambiguity of it, the
It
ambiguity
is
aspect of
ambiguity.
it.
It is not the ambiguity of vertigo. It's a different kind of ambiguity. It is there. There is ambiguity. It is the ambiguity of Tolstoy. It is not the ambiguity of Kafka, right? I don't know if
Oh,
these, yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, I get it, I get it.
Okay, you get it. Okay, both are ambiguous, but in different ways. One is the ambiguity of the real world, but the other is ambiguity of a created world. They're completely different, right? Okay, they're
Yeah.
completely different. Have I made my point clear up to now?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right. Okay. Now the point is, in the Puranic scheme, okay, truth is not interpretable. You can't interpret. For example, you look at Hamlet. You look at Hamlet. Hamlet is interpretable. You know what Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, did. What is this? You don't know exactly. There are various theories. What Hamlet was really about. You can't interpret Karna like that, right? Karna is interpreted in a different way. What
Yeah.
does he mean? What is the dharmic thing? What is the thing? You can't interpret him as a work of art. He's basically a philosophical text with a message. Okay, with a message of some sort. It is a moral message of some sort. Arjuna, Karna, all these are moral message of some sort. So he can't be interpreted. It's not open. Mahabharata and Ramayana are not open to interpretation the way mimetic text would be. It has a meaning. Of course, the point is it is so old that this meaning can be interpreted in some way because different people. But the point is there's some agreement on that. When they retell the Ramayana, when the DMK ideologues retell the Ramayana with the Ravana as the hero, it's not an interpretation, it's a retelling, right? You get my point? Okay. So basic thing is, it is generally supposed that whatever stories are there in the Ramayana or the Mahabharata have one particular meaning, which is supposed to be moral guidance for us. Okay, is that all right? Okay,
Yeah,
it's meant to be moral guidance. Yeah,
but
please.
that's but since it's like say Ramayana or Mahabharata, both of these are poems. Essentially, they're poems, right?
Okay.
So aren't we supposed to like not supposed to exactly, but isn't that doesn't that give us a sense of uh, like doesn't that give us a space of interpretation from those texts, like the characters and
See,
what they say? For example, Gandhari
see,
being
poetry, let's say poetry, all at one point, when orality was there, all literature was poetry. It came first. See,
yeah
mainly because poetry is easier to memorize, right?
yeah
But the Mahabharata is not ambiguous in the sense, okay, that mimesis makes it ambiguous. Ravana is also seen as a god. Look, I don't want to go too much into this. The point is this, right? There are stories which they're not interpretable. Ravana has a past of some sort. There are stories, karma, there is a small thing. It's a very complicated. Let's see. Okay, I'll put it this way. The ambiguity is, it's not ambiguous in the sense that Hamlet is ambiguous, the authorial ambiguity created by the author. It's an ambiguity which comes about because of a view of the world which is very complex. It comes about by because the doctrine of dharma being a very complex thing. It comes about because the doctrine of karma is a complex thing. But they are still doctrines, right? Mimesis does not illustrate doctrine.
true
You get me?
yeah
Mimesis does not illustrate doctrine. Mahabharata and Ramayana are still illustrating doctrine, but the doctrines are complex. They are not like Ten Commandments. They are complex. The doctrine of dharma is complex because how does it follow? What exactly? In fact, there's a big distance between us today and what dharma meant. The Buddhists have what they call dhamma, which is some variant of dharma. But it's a very complex notion, and the notion is clouded in mystery very much. We don't really know. I mean, how to use that for today is a thing which we won't be able to do. So the question is, it is still doctrine of some sort. The doctrine itself is complex and difficult to relate to today. This is my understanding of it. Okay, which is different from authorial. Mimesis will not promote doctrine regardless of a complexity, right? I think that point is okay, right?
yes
Okay,
sir
then. Okay, so the truth is known through mystical perception. So the basically all Indian movies, all Indian popular films have a meaning which is pre-existent, which is the story is used to relay the meaning. They do not try to create a thing where you're not. They never come out of a Indian popular film saying what did this film mean, why did he do this, what was this character doing, what was this character not doing, why didn't he do this. You don't ask these questions, right? They are there because the message is clear. If you did that, the purpose of the film, which is to relay the message, would be lost. You wouldn't know what to deal with that. Okay. So the question is, the story. The story is a way of illustrating a problem. The problem is, if you take anything, there's always a message. You take, for example, Three Idiots. You take, you take any of these things. Okay, let us take this thing of the one strategy which they use is a strategy of what is called the first cause. What I would call the first cause. Now you look at what is the first
yeah
cause in this Devdas. What is the first cause in Devdas?
the
What is the
Sanjay
first
Bhansali
event?
one
Look, the basic difference between causality in Indian cinema or popular cinema and the thing of Hollywood is there is a chain of cause and effects begun with individual motivation. Here you have something called the first cause which sets everything into motion. What is the first cause in Devdas? The father punishing
uh,
Devdas, right? Hitting him on his
father
hand.
punishing Devdas yeah
Yeah, Devdas. The
yeah
father punishing Devdas creates Devdas's character forever as a weak person who can't stand up, right? It is a thing, all his
yeah
subsequent
and
weakness
also like
vis-a-vis women
sends
or
him away and
whatever,
yeah
all these weaknesses subsequently arise out of his beating that his father has administered him. Now look at something like this Diwar. I keep giving the same
yeah
examples every time, bear with me. But Diwar, if you look at it, what is the first cause in Diwar?
him being like मेरा बाप चोर है वाला
Ah,
incident
right. You see, you know that, right?
yeah
I'm just
yeah
telling
yeah
you what you already know. Okay. Now you look at something like Hum Aapke Hain Kaun.
yeah
What is the first cause in Hum Aapke Hain Kaun? Okay, let us look at Hum Aapke Account. How does it work as a story? It works. All of you are giving you examples. All of you know. Hum Aapke Account is a story of two families having to be brought together.
Yeah.
Somehow marriages have to be made between them to keep the families together. It is essential that one family of a scholar and the other family of a rich man, a businessman, should be somehow brought together by marriages between them, right? When
Yeah.
the first daughter is widowed, the first husband is widowed, they have to
Yeah.
contact alliance with the second one so that the relationship with the families are kept together, right?
Yeah.
Why are the families have to be brought together? Because of the friendship between those two, right?
Yeah.
You get me?
Yeah.
Between
Yeah.
Anupam Kher and Alok
And
Nath,
Aloknath.
that friendship has to be kept. What is the friendship? Why is that friendship so important to them?
Because of the history that they have together.
What is the history? The history is that both were in love with Rima Lago, right?
Yeah.
Both were in love with Rima Lago. Anupam Kher married her. Alok Nath stepped aside. Alok Nath made the sacrifice and this man married Rima Lago. And because he married Rima Lago, because that man made the sacrifice, their friendship is timeless, it is eternal. So that to keep that friendship sacrosanct, to keep it the thing, they have to keep having these marriages. Okay? Can you tell me why Alok Nath is uncle and not father to these boys? Is the
No, sir,
question.
I can't think
Okay?
of a reason. I never
The
saw it that way.
reason he's uncle and not father is if
Yeah.
he was father, that means he married somebody else. That means his relationship with Rima Lago was not true
Yeah.
love. If it was not true love, that means his sacrifice was not perfect.
Yeah.
If the sacrifice was not perfect, the families don't have to be
Yeah.
kept
Yeah. Yeah.
together, right? You get me? So the point is that
True.
this basic
Yes.
the basic grammar is that this prehistory of the story, what I call the prehistory of the story, contains that single event which brought these people together, right? Which has necessitated the whole logic, causal logic of the film. If you look at the Three Idiots, what is the first cause in Three Idiots?
The death of Joy, the guy
No,
who committed suicide.
no. The first cause is gardener's boy wanting, being a genius and wanting to study.
But that
Gardener's,
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, right? It
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Amir Khan being gardener's son who wants to study because he's a genius, right? So the
Yeah.
question is that is concealed and is revealed somewhere at the end. But the point is that is the first cause, right? So the
Yeah.
point is that all logic will go back to the first cause in some way. All of it will go back to the first cause, and the first cause is the basis for everything happening. Okay, this is different from your Hollywood logic. Okay,
Yeah.
so the question is, since this message of the popular film is so important, so important to be delivered, so important that the first cause should be that the message message cannot be distorted, right?
Yeah.
When the message can't be distorted, you have to come up with these vehicles for the message, which is the characters, the situation. Okay, all this has to have unidimensional characteristics. You cannot have multi-dimensional. It's like a fable, right? You get me? It's a fable. What is a fable? How does a fable work? In a fable, a fox has to be cunning, a monkey has to be mischievous. If the fox was not cunning but was good-hearted, your whole story would go, right? The fable would
So they
not
can't have
deliver.
multiple shades.
Yeah, you can't have multiple threads. You have to have one meaning, and you have to. So that is why in Indian cinema, because the message was so important, they devised this thing of having situations which were one-dimensional. You had characters who were one-dimensional. It was not my message. My message, you're trying to mimic the world. You're trying to imitate its complexity, and because you're trying to imitate its complexity, you have ambiguity, right? You have ambiguity. Indian
Yeah.
cinema cannot be ambiguous. If you come across an Indian film which is ambiguous, forget about one or two or three are ambiguous. There are people like Ray who was ambiguous often. Katak was ambiguous. There was a
No,
couple
but
of
like even in popular Hindi cinema, like uh, I I would say Bandit Queen is a mainstream film, if I can call it that.
Bandit
So
Queen is
Bandit
not
Queen
an
was a
Indian film at all. It's not an Indian film. It's been made. Your Salam Bombay is not an Indian film. Bandit Queen was
no,
made by
but
money
no,
somewhere else.
that's just like
Yeah,
the
I'm saying,
co-production.
look, I mean, let's talking popular cinema. Art cinema, I mean, we'll come to another day. We'll talk about it. I think popular,
Yeah,
by
but
and
when
large,
it
this
comes
is
to
the
popular
message.
cinema, also say films like Heather or a film like say Omkara, perhaps.
That is the, I mean, Omkara is trying to be Shakespeare. No? He's trying to do some kind of Shakespeare. If Shakespeare is ambiguous, you're trying to imitate Shakespeare in some way, right? And so the question is,
Yeah.
where does the source come from? It doesn't come from the Indian epics. It comes from Shakespeare tragedy. And Shakespeare is mimetic. So you're trying to do something. When you're trying to actually go around trying to be mimetic, you're doing something else. Omkara is Othello, right? Othello is always
Yeah.
ambiguous. Okay, but even there, I mean, I won't go into that now. But the point is that ambiguity, it's not ambiguity is assumed because you're imitating Shakespeare. It's not fully ambiguous in that way. For example, in Makbul, the witches mean something. Okay,
Yeah.
why witches he replaces them with police and kundli? Okay, okay. They replaces this with astrology. It is something that astrology is not fate. Astrology is not in the hands of the gods. Astrology is mechanistic. It is the planets. It can be understood. You know, it is not ambiguous. Astrology is not meant to be ambiguous. Okay, let's not go into that. It will get out of the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
The important thing is that doctors are noble, young people are romantic, people with spectacles are scholarly, studious, childhood friends have to be loyal, playback singer. Look, playback singing. What does playback singing do? It was basically trying to put somebody else's voice to give an ideal. For example, you take Lata Mangeshkar's voice. It's an ideal thing of feminine virtue. You know, it's got that sweetness, that certain thing. So Lata Mangeshkar's voice was used for children as well, innocence. So Lata Mangeshkar's voice is very different from a classical music. It's a voice deliberately without individuality to say it could be used for any woman, right? All good women would get Lata Mangeshkar's voice, not so good women would get Asha Bhonsle's voice. This is the basic thing at one point in Hindi cinema, this is the basic thing. Cabaret dancers would get one kind of voice, the virtuous heroine would get another kind of voice. So basically, there's a kind of typecasting of characters to make them innocent, to make them not so innocent, to make them wicked, all kinds of things, right? But basically, there is no character. Yeah, please. Okay, please, can you tell me? Okay, what is this question? Somebody is asking.
So I
One,
have a
one
doubt. One ending movies commander because sorry we couldn't understand one ending. Or what do you mean by one ending? Like open ending, open-ended films are you talking about? What kind of films are you talking about? Dharani.
open-ended. Huh? It's difficult
Open-ended, yeah.
to give me examples of what is ambiguous. But so far in my thing, even Anurag Kashyap is not ambiguous.
No, it's
Okay,
not. Yeah.
he's not ambiguous. Ambiguity is not there. The way, for example, the number of things which are written, the volumes are written on a book, on a film like Vertigo, right? You can't
Yeah.
write so much about the meaning of what Vertigo is about, what is this thing, what does it mean, what is the story, how are the things related, what does the film mean, right? It's a kind of thing that ambiguity and complexity of Vertigo, which is generally now called the greatest film ever made or whatever, that is valued because it's highly ambiguous. That is not a thing which is valued Indian cinema, where power, this thing of making a point, these are the basic things. Because your epics had to make a point, your films are going about it in the same way. Ambiguity is not a virtue, it is not my message. Right? Even art cinema is not my message. If you take art cinema, they also have a certain meaning, usually social meaning of some sort. It is the oppression of the marginalized. You take something from Mrinal's sense, it will be like that. It will be solidarity of the working class. They all have meanings. Ray is different. Adur Gopalakrishnan at one point was different. Arvindan was different. Ghatak was different. They're somewhat. But basically, by and large, most Indian cinema has avoided this entire thing of ambiguity. Okay. Now you come to space and time. Look at space, for instance, the way space is defined in Indian cinema, right? Space, you
So I
see,
just thought of an example. Say like a
yeah,
film like Koi Lucky Lucky Hai. What about that? Like there is
it's
ambiguity in that.
ambiguous. I've seen this movie, I've forgotten, but the point is, it's somewhat like your Bunty or Bubbly kind of stuff, right?
No, sir. It was see Bunty or Bubbly, as you said that like it followed the basic like it's a chase thing. So there are these characters from
Yeah,
small
I know,
town
but
who
it's
went through.
basically the same thing. This guy is a crook, isn't he a crook? Came at
Yeah,
the same time of.
yeah, but that ambiguity is that like his insecurities and what does it mean for him to fit in, and also the class difference. It spoke of a lot
It
of
is,
things through this
it is
character.
not a character study.
Yeah,
It is not a character study. You cannot take that as a character study and interpret that as a character. As far as I know, there's been no film where there's a character study where you're asked to invited to. He's a certain thing and he likes to steal, and finally he's talking about this film was made at a particular time, and like Bunty or Bubbly. I think it would be about the same time. Doom 2 is another, right? Where basically thieving was considered
it came
acceptable.
to
It's not a character study.
no, it came to It is because the guy, it's not talking about his
One
life as a
question
thief.
here,
It's talking about
maybe
his,
super
yeah,
deluxe maybe is ambiguous.
ambiguous.
Super deluxe, it's not ambiguous in that sense. It's actually a kind of, I would say super deluxe is a kind of takeoff on Almodovar. It's a kind of whatever Almodovar did. I mean, look, if I have a fairly clear picture of what super deluxe is all about. But the point is, if I take it up now, it will completely, I'll take it up in the subsequent session. At some point, I'll deal with it.
Yeah, let's just continue. So it's like
Okay.
it can go on. Yeah.
Okay, then we'll do that. I'll deal with super deluxe. Same person, please ask me later at another other session. I'll bring up the thing. Okay. Okay, where was we? Where were we? Okay, space. Now the
Yeah.
point is that space in Indian cinema is not continuous in the sense of
Yeah.
Hollywood. Okay, it's not Aristotelian. Space has qualities. You have rich man's house, you have poor man's house, you have police station, you have classroom. Okay, you have what are the other things? Hospital, right? All these are events take place in these spaces. Each one is represented by its qualities. For example, what is rich man's house? It's a house with a winding staircase, right? It's got a winding staircase. I'm talking about early movies. And
Yeah.
then a
Yeah.
poor man's house would be a hovel with water coming down in the rains. It will be water will be dripping through the roof. With poor man's house. Then you will have hospital. You'll have drips. There'll be a person with a white coat. This would be the hospital. Police station. You know how it is. The interesting thing is in Andaz. I don't know if you've seen Andaz. I'm talking about 1948 or 49 film Andaz with Dilip Kumar, Raj
Yes.
Kapoor. Okay. In Andaz, both Raj Kapoor and Nargis are very, very rich in Bombay, right? Both of them, both of them have huge houses, both with winding staircases because they're both rich, right? How do you distinguish between Raj Kapoor's house and Nargis's house? How they do it is Raj Kapoor has a mother, Nargis doesn't have a mother, right? So Raj Kapoor's house is shown. There is this old mother who's standing next to the door to tell you that this is the house with the mother, which is very different from Nargis's house. She doesn't have a mother. So the presence of the mother becomes a way of qualifying the house. Okay, this is a particular thing, right? So that way. So now when you come to time, you got it. So space is basically a space with qualities. Okay, somebody is asking what does mimesis means. Mimesis simply means the imitation of the world, okay, by film or by painting. If a box looks square, when you do the painting, you will paint it square, right? If a person has two eyes, a nose, and he's got a beard, when you paint that guy, you imitate him, you will paint him with the eyes, ears, nose, and spectacles, or whatever is the way he looks like. That is called mimesis. You replicate the world in some way, but since the world itself is complex, when you replicate it, that complexity should be produced in some sense, should be suggested in some sense. Okay? That's all it means. It's not a very good. Mimetic, mimesis, mimicry. Okay, these are all words from the same etymology, right? Okay, where was I now? Time. Okay. Indian cinema, okay, you're there listening now. Indian
Yes.
cinema does not have chronology, careful chronology. It has chronology, but very difficult. For instance, you look at something like Sholay. Even after seeing the movie two, three times, it's difficult to say what event came before what event, right? What about the event between, Daya Bahaduri's childhood and this man? So, there are various events there. It's
Yeah.
very difficult to keep this chronology. It's very difficult to keep duration. In fact, one important Indian film where duration is denoted through appointment or a deadline, which was that movie which made international popular film which made international news of some sort. Lagan,
The
right? Lagan,
Lagan, yeah,
right?
Lagan.
Lagan, why? Because what is the duration? It is 3 months. Why is it 3 months? That is the time given for these guys to practice for the cricket match and play the cricket match, right? Since you have that
Yeah.
appointment deadline, so you mean that 3 months, so which means that whole length of the story is exactly 3 months. You never have this. In fact, the very first one of the early Hindi movies I saw called Saudagar begins with the childhood of the grandfathers and ends with the, what is it called, the adulthood of the grandchildren or something. I really can't tell whether it's 50 years or 70 years or 80 years. A lot of stories were told like this. Can you tell me what is the duration of something like of Mother India? Very difficult to say what is the duration of Mother India. Where does it begin? Where does it end? The same thing with You don't have parallel action. Very rare to come across parallel action in thing when something is happening here. Supposing while I am talking here, somebody in your room there who's one of the people who's watching this entire thing is somehow okay. He is feeling hungry. He wants to go and eat while this thing is going on. Okay, that is happening simultaneously, right? Okay. So the point is
Yeah.
that sort of simultaneity you will not have in Indian movies. Okay, boss walking up and down. Okay, where is this my employee? He has not yet come. He should have been here at 10 o'clock. Mr. Dithers waiting. Bumstead has not come in here at 10 o'clock. Why is he not? He's working way passing up and down. Then you see that employee trying to catch some tram, trying to do this, trying to come. That parallel action you won't find. Very rare. You look at it. When parallel action is there, it usually be linked by a communication like a telephone, or in Devdas it will be a premonition. Paro imagining something about Devdas or Devdas imagining something about Paro, premonition and something happening. Okay, that thing of imagining people happening is not the same as simultaneous action, right? So the simultaneous action means when this is happening here, that is happening there. That is simultaneous action. Okay. Now this is a
Yes.
fundamental. Now this is an important thing. Okay. So time, space, and time is very important. Okay. Now the first cause is very important. Okay, we'll come to the next slide. First cause, the seed in the story, the seed in the that contains the meaning, and that seed grows up into the story like a plant grows out of a seed. Okay, that is important. The point is, once the seed is there, subsequent events will not disrupt the flow of the thing. In Diwar, for instance, nothing else will come in the way, like that man bashing him up, or that all the other things are extraneous. They will not interfere with the delivery of the story. The story will continue in the same way. This is fundamental. Okay, you got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is that whereas in Hollywood story, extraneous causes can come in. They will come and interrupt the thing, and so that but they will come and you will respond to that as well. Okay.
Can you give an example, sir?
Okay, uh, let us take a movie in which, okay, one of the fundamental thing in a Hollywood movie, the fundamental thing is individual is in a certain position of undisturbed state. There's a disturbance which comes along. Like for example, if this man is living a farmer's life, okay, at some point war starts, he's called to war, that's a disturbance, he's supposed to go and fight, and he goes in the war and he fights, other events will come, okay. The other events, like for example, you take something like Forrest Gump, yeah.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump begins in some way, but the point is all kinds of things happen in the way, and each one directs its thing in some other way, right? Whereas
Yeah.
every single event is important enough, it directs his by life in a certain way. You take Spider-Man itself. You take Spider-Man, okay, if you take the first cause of Spider-Man, if you look at it as the first cause, is the fact that he's bitten by the spider. But then you've got this other man, the villain, who comes in somewhere later. He's supposed to respond to the villain, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Villain is important. He changes him in some other direction, sends him in some other direction, right? This will not happen in Diwar. Diwar, whatever is ordained in the first cause will continue to happen. These other things will happen to him as events, but those events will not direct him from his reason for his anxiety, his state of anxiety, and all that will never be quenched. He will remain in that particular state. Same thing with Devdas. Devdas' initial father's beating determines forever what his life is going to be. With women, with this, with that. He has to be failure. Nothing on earth is going to deter him from being a failure. Okay? He cannot recover and suddenly something happens, he wins the lottery ticket and becomes, so he can't happen that way. So basically this first cause will dictate forever what happens to this man. There you have intermediate causes coming in and altering his thing because he's motivated. Here Indian cinema is in the passive voice, it's what I call karmic causality. Karma will dictate to us what happens to us in this life, right? It's passive in some sense. What happens to you in this life is only basically a product of your karma, right? Which means that you can't, as an individual, take a decision that I'm going to alter my karma, right? That is the way. So the question is that basically this is the way it works. Okay. Now, since the meaning is constant in value. It cannot be contextual. Okay. It cannot be, for example, you cannot have something like, shall we say, a new historical development of some sort. You cannot have, for example, if the BJP comes to power in the center with Narendra Modi there, that cannot become a guiding thing in a movie. Oh, this man decides that particular thing after Narendra Modi became, Narendra Modi set out some scheme. As a result of that scheme, he did this. Doesn't happen like that. He'll have to respond to shall we say, an eternal thing of some sort. It'll have to be love of something. It'll have to be, even this revenge because it's so far back in time. Okay. It'll have to be a basic thing. It cannot be contextual. Am I making sense here? When I say contextual, I mean something like COVID. Can you have a story out of COVID that this man was all right, his family was ruined because of COVID? Can you have that? I doubt it. I doubt that the film can come.
No, but sir, say for example, there's this 2010 film, like the quickest film that I could come up with right now is like say Tere Bin Laden. Have you seen that film?
The comedy, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
Tere Bin Laden.
yeah. So it's entirely woven around the 9/11 attack.
It's woven around Bin Laden looking like a villain. Bin Laden, look, it's
Yeah,
not a
exactly.
historical
But
cause.
yeah,
You've
but
got to understand this. Okay, you've got to understand this that because Gandhi is invoked in the film. See, you know what happens? See, I'll tell you what happens. Yeah, this is a very interesting question you brought about. You told me. What happens is Gandhi is invoked. Gandhi does not invoke history. Gandhi has become a creature like Rama and Krishna today in India. Okay, Gandhi's value is eternal. He is an eternal hero, right? Gandhi. Just because he died in 1948 and was born at a particular time doesn't mean that Hindi cinema would look at Gandhi as anything but he's eternal. His values are eternal. Same thing with Bin Laden would be seen as an eternal villain in some way, right?
yeah, he would. But see, the film was about this reporter who wanted to go to America and he had to be deported because the 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
That's what started the film, right?
It's
That's what
same,
the first cause that you said.
It's the same thing with that other one, which My Name is Khan, right?
Yeah.
But the question is, you have a look at that film. I've not seen either of these films. Okay, you have a look at the film and see where exactly it starts. What is the thing? You'll probably find something which is substantiates my thing. I can't really talk to you because I haven't seen these movies. I'm
No, but
pretty sure
in
that
My
both of
Name is
them.
Khan, in My Name is Khan, it comes in much later. But Tere Bin Laden, that's how it starts. That the
It
first scene is
starts,
that.
but you look at the thing. There would be something prior to this. What I mean, you'll have a look. I'll try to look at this movie and explain it to you next week. Okay,
Yes,
exactly how this film works. Okay, I'll try to explain it to you. Okay,
sure, sir.
this is an interesting film. Is it done by history or is it available on YouTube? It must be available. So I'll take this as an exercise for myself. I'll answer this question next week. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let me answer that question next week. Okay. Now, by and large, there are no contextual truths, and then that all these truths have to do with eternal. Even if you take art cinema, the truths are the poor, the marginalized have to be the condition of the marginalized, the thing of poverty. Okay, these are treated as eternal truths. They're not actually truths which are brought about suddenly or some such thing. The poor would be a permanent category of some sort, right? Okay. The poor would be a permanent category. Solidarity among the working class would be a permanent emotion. These are all permanent messages. Okay, they're not brought about because of a certain historical data. They're non-contextual. Okay, then you come back to.
But sir, a film like say Hazaro Khwaishein Aisi, which was about that time, about that era, in which the like you know the
You look at it
all of a
carefully.
sudden it
The
was
message is something else.
yeah.
As I would say, they may situate it wherever the message is universal. The message is not pertaining to that point. I'm pretty sure that the message of
Oh no,
Bin Laden.
true.
Okay.
The
The
message is
message will never be
universal.
always be non-contextual. Okay. The message would be some
The
kind
message,
of
of course,
saying, yeah,
of
message.
course.
The message. The question is, if you locate it there, whereas you take something like a historical thing. For example, let us take video piracy as a message. That's not a message would have any value in 1945, right, or 1956, right?
True.
Okay. Video piracy is a contemporary thing. It is contextual to today. You can have a movie in mode of video pirate. You can have a movie about insiders here. Like you take Hollywood, insider trading. If you've seen something like arbitrage, okay, financial crimes. This is contextual to the present. You get me?
Yeah, but the message is of course much more
Your
universal.
message is contextual to the present. Indian cinema message is not contextual to any present. It is always eternal. They may situate it in a certain moment, but the message is always contextual. In My Name is Khan, it would be simply the fact that we must not distinguish between people of different races. All people of religions are equal. The anguish of a man would be like that. Okay. The same thing with Bin Laden, and I'll clarify with you next week, but this is the basic thing. Okay.
And Dharani says that what about Hiram? Kamal Hassan's
Okay,
Hiram.
again, I can't. If you give me an exercise, this exercise will have to be one movie. I can't watch more than one. Okay, even here there is
Okay.
something. Okay, I mean even that
Okay.
that's also the independent movement of. I mean, I'll tell you about Hiram. I think I've seen it also, but I forgot. Okay,
Yes. It's
okay.
okay.
Now because the truth, because what is being relayed is the truth. You can't have point of view. Okay, you can't have point of view. You can't have authorial subjectivity. So it's always has to be in the third person. There is no POV in Indian cinema sustained in a sustained way. This is not the truth. This is what is actually there.
Yeah.
Right. The camera is omniscient. The camera sees everything in Indian cinema. Right. This is not true of suspense movies, Hitchcock and all that. The camera does not see anything, everything. It sees only what the character sees. There are many blank areas that the camera does not see at all. This is one of the fundamental things of novel writing, that people do not see what happens to other people. Right. Indian cinema is not like that. And again, I'm going to popular cinema. Art cinema also, in many ways, is like that. Okay. So the question
Yes.
is, camera doesn't see anything. Okay, now I'll ask you a question here, which you will have to answer from what I told you. What about the dream sequence in Indian cinema? What do you?
Yeah.
Isn't it subjective? No, you answer this question.
It is. It is subjective, of course. Like to the character, but
That means what I'm saying is
overall, the
wrong.
overall theme.
No, I'm saying if it's
No.
subjective,
No.
what I'm saying is wrong.
No.
No, the dream sequence in
No.
Indian cinema is not subjective.
No. But
It
how?
is a
How if it?
generic dream. It is a generic dream sequence.
No.
It
But
is
if
generic.
say
Okay.
like if a character dreams, for example, let's say the dream sequence from Nayak, Satyajit Ray's Nayak. That's
Again, okay, now you give me a good example. Okay,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
does not point to his psychology. It's a general dream which people in love will make. I'm not talking about Nayak. A general dream of love is a general dream of wealth. The Nayak, it's a question of it's a general moral dream of some person having money, finding that money is not no use, that death lurks at the end. If you look at that dream sequence, Nayak, by the way, is vastly inspired by this Bergman's Wild Strawberries.
Yeah.
You look at wild strawberries and look at wild strawberries, there's a link made between Isaac Borg's psychology, okay, and the dream he has. Here there is no link between that man's psychology and the dream. It's a dream that any person who has come upon the fact that wealth is useless would have. Get me?
But like if the character is all about that, then like why
No,
isn't
no,
it
no, it's
linked?
generic. Let me put it this way. Dreams in Indian cinema, like love, is generic. Okay? It's the dream of a lover. It is not the dream of an individual. You get my point? Okay? The lover is a certain category, a social category. A poor man's dream. He wants money. He'll be rolling over in money. Okay? He'll be going out in a car. That does not point to his psychology. It's a dream that any poor man can be depicted by that dream, right? Any lover can be depicted by the kind of dreams that lovers have in Hindi cinema. Okay. So the basic thing is they are not subjectivity, the dreams are generic. It is very different kind from the kind of dream sequences point to individual psychologies in Hollywood movies. Okay. No, 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 nothing. You can please go ahead and make point of view. Nothing is preventing you from making them. I am giving you this examples as generally what is the thing. See, it's not that easy, to break away your mindset as an Indian. It's not that easy to break away. You make that movie. You got this point of view has to be linked with a lot of other things in the whole story has to be written in a certain way. You get me? You can't conceive of this saying just put in point of view in a particular film. There are brief points POV in certain films, but the point is this POV can be put in. You can make movies, you can break whatever I'm saying. That's not the point. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that this is the way films should be made. My position is that of a critic looking at how films have been made. I'm not saying films should be made in this way. I'm not saying that. You please go ahead and make it, but the point is a lot of associations have to be made in how the story is written. Okay. So the question is not a prescription of how Indians should make films. It's an observation of films of Indians have made films. That's a different thing. Okay. You understood that point? Okay. Now I'll continue. Right. Now we go to the next slide. Orality and literacy. Right. Is that the one? Orality and literacy. Okay. Now the point is the Puranic scheme of narration is a product of an oral culture. Right. As I said earlier, orality means you imagine, the kind of emotions that they have is completely different. The reason is, I mean, people who are illiterate, when I say illiterate, I mean who come out of an illiterate background, most of us have not bothered to, have not spoken to them, have not, people who have brought up. What we are largely constructed in some way. People who are part of an oral culture construct themselves in certain ways, they feel certain emotions, they label their emotions as this. We know the word nervousness, we know the kind of nervous thing because of our exposure to literacy, to our exposure to the novel, to exposure to stories. But a person who's only heard the Ramayana and Mahabharata, this word nervousness would have no meaning. Anger would be there, fear would be there, but nervousness not exist. The point is that Puranic thing of narration, which is largely the old scheme, what was traditional Bollywood, and for example Tamil cinema, Kannada cinema, all this kind of thing, we product of an oral culture. Somebody asked about Rajnikant. Rajnikant is the person who can summon up the emotions required in an oral culture, right? Orality, literacy is something else. Literacy is born out of the novel by and large, by a novel, newspaper and all this. It acknowledges smaller emotions. I think I already made this point. Now, in India, orality is of great importance because truth itself was coded in orality. Okay? Truth in the sense the Brahminical thing, the Vedas were meant to be recited, they were not read, they were meant to be recited. The Vedas, so the question, there was a kind of valorization, there was a kind of upholding of orality in some way in the Indian culture, as a result of which orality had a special value, and the Brahmins held on to that whatever oral knowledge, which is why orality is a special value. It is not simply absence of literacy. Okay, you get me? So the question is, with the arrival of the novel, you find that, I mean, a novel has come a long time back, but when films start targeting, now for example, Hindi films, multiplex Hindi films actually target English-speaking Indians by and large. They have titles in English, they've got legends in English, they've got that sort of thing in English, right? So the question is, they're targeting, they're targeting very specifically literate people. These large theaters, single-screen theaters. If you've seen, I've seen one in Jaipur. I mean, it's enormous, the size of that theater. It can accommodate 1,000 people or so, and can accommodate all kinds of classes of people. Which is why they had these divisions between the different classes to keep the classes separate. In the multiplex, because you're targeting one class, you don't have divisions. There's only one class, right? Everybody belongs to a certain class. Basically, that is the reason. The division which was necessary to keep classes apart, which you have in your tent cinema. For tent cinema, you have these classes. You used to have these single screen theaters. You don't have it in the multiplex. Okay. Now, with the Western style education making inroads, there's been a growth of literate people. So, out of literacy has come the novel and other forms of literature. People can understand kind of emotions that Nawazuddin Siddiqui portrays, the kind of thing that Irfan Khan, Manoj Bajpayee, all these are Nasiruddin Shah. See, Nasiruddin Shah and all these people acted in what was called the middle cinema at one point, right? That middle cinema was meant for middle class people, for educated people. You would never, very rarely have he acted in one or two, three days, I think. He acted one or two commercial films. But now that distinction is going. Why is the distinction going between middle cinema and popular cinema? It is because it is possible through the multiplex medium to target specifically literate audiences which you couldn't do earlier. Okay. Then you are targeting large audiences across classes, across cultures. You could do that. Now you don't do that. Okay. So the question is, now it's a very different kind of thing. So you have this orality inscribed cinema, and you have the literacy inscribed cinema. The orality inscribed cinema would be the cinema of all Dharmendra. I think today Salman Khan, for instance, today would be a reigning king of orality inscribed cinema. Salman Khan has a range of emotions which are very heroic, right? Even when he's doing crooked things in Dabang, he does it heroically, right? Okay, but it's not shown as crooked. It's not meant to be crooked. But the point is that the Salman Khan, it makes it a point that he doesn't speak English. So he's addressing a large semi-literate or people who come out of the epic tradition. His characters are very larger than life. That is not true of your Amir Khan. Amir Khan is different. Shah Rukh Khan is both. He can play this, he can play that. Okay, so the entire thing is the literacy in inscribed cinema gradually becoming more and more and more, and they are the ones. See, people are literate. People are the ones who have money today, right? They've got money to the difference between single screen theaters, the kind of prices they charge per ticket, and the kind of prices charged by multiplexes are very different, right? So the question is that you can target rich people, and rich people you can assume are literate. You will not have, as a class, rich people will be literate. So you can target rich people means you will target literate people as well. You can target them like that, okay? So that is very different from your single screen theaters. You go to, and I think as an exercise, people can do. I know you can travel to these small towns to see what kind of movies are shown in these small towns. I went to some Moradabad or Jhansi or some such one of these places. The kind of movies being shown there, they're showing Daku movies there. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Daku movies, some 2 or 3. When was the last Daku movie shown in a city? I don't know. No? Sunny Deol Daku movie being shown. I mean, I've not even heard of these movies. When they're being shown in these small places, I mean, you'd be surprised that the class of movies being shown in those places for the locals in small towns in North India would be very different from the kind of shown in these, what are they
And
called?
also, there's a very peculiar thing. There's a very peculiar thing of like they modify posters of films that are not even that violent, and they put it up like that. It's a very violent film. This blasts and everyone. And it was an Indra Kumar film. It was Ishq, Indra Kumar's Ishq, and it had a poster of Ajay Devgan holding
you look at, for example, horror movie. Okay, horror movie.
Yeah.
Horror movie is actually playing for who? It's playing for the illiterates. It's playing for the orality thing. Their entire thing, for example, it's I think with Mahesh Bhatt.
Vikram Bhatt.
Mukesh Bhatt. I don't know.
Vikram Bhatt is the director.
Yeah, Mukesh Bhatt is the director. Okay, there's a slight change there, but basically it's the same. If you look at what is that, Purana Mandir and movies like that, okay.
Those Ramsey brothers,
Yeah, Ramsey brothers. It's a very different kind of stuff. So if you look at where they're screened, you will find that it will be shown in Chandni Chowk in Delhi. These movies will be shown in certain areas where you have a large number of migrant population. You have people who with this orality inscribed public you'll get there. Whereas these movies will be shown elsewhere. So the question is, this targeting enables, okay? Now, art film, middle cinema, okay, new Bollywood, or all, when I say new Bollywood, I mean stuff like Lunchbox, okay? You find all these movies are products of literacy. Whereas your Salman Khan, Bharat, and all these movies, Dabang, Bharat, all these movies are products of orality, okay? So that is the difference. That Indian cinema were to be divided into 2 categories. You will find one orality inscribed, and you will find one literacy inscribed. Now I'll ask you a simple question, okay? You're aware of the popular film stars in India, South India. Let us take 2 stars. Let us take Rajnikant and let us take Mohanlal, right? You can know that they're completely different in their acting, right? Okay. Why are these people different in their acting styles? Both are South Indian. Why is Mohanlal? Can you explain whatever based on what I said?
Because what I have seen from I'm not that well read when it comes to South Indian films, but from what I've seen is that the Malayali audience is it's completely different from what a Rajnikant audience is.
Why?
That perhaps has got to do something with the
post-liberal.
Literacy, yeah, exactly. Literacy, post-liberalization.
Right? So Malayalam audiences are aware of the novel. They're aware of okay, right? They're literate. They're aware of the novel. They're aware of novelistic characters. They're aware. Mohanlal, okay, the emotions are very subtle. They're straight. I mean, they could be very well. You don't know what he's thinking. Rajnikant, Shivaji Ganeshan, even more than Rajnikant. Okay, Shivaji Ganeshan will cry, will scream, will do all this. He's basically doing all this for a certain audience, which is orality based. The same thing with Rajkumar in Kannada cinema. Okay, a lot of these audiences are basically, it's not that they're illiterate, I'm not saying they're illiterate, but they're basically their responses are basic, because after all, what does illiterate mean? It means, being illiterate means being able to sign your name or some such thing, right? Writing a
Yeah.
check or signing a name. It doesn't mean reading novels. So basically, all of us are constructed in some way or the other, right? We are all constructed. We are constructed as literate people. We are constructed by stories in magazines. We understand emotions like nervousness, affection. We are the smaller emotions. Okay, whereas the kind of emotions which persons who heard the Ramayana and Mahabharata and respond only to that, to respond to Puranas, respond to oral storytelling, would be completely different. So your Rajnikant and your Shivaji Ganesan cater to an audience which is largely orality inscribed, whereas Mohanlal, Mammootty, and the Malayalam thing, because they come from a very literate background, are catering to a public which is basically very highly literate and therefore accustomed to characters from the novels. Which is why this is why Mammootty and Mohanlal is one kind of cinema. This is another kind of cinema. But at the same time, this is not to be confused with this thing of messages. That messages continues. Okay, if you take, for instance, you take something like Drishyam. Have you seen Drishyam? You have seen
Yes, sir.
Drishyam?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Jitu
Okay,
Joseph. Yeah.
yeah. You take Drishyam. What is the message in Drishyam? Does it have a message?
It does, like person does everything to save his family or something.
Ah, right,
Yeah.
correct. It is not a suspense film in the way that a Hollywood suspense film is. And not
Uh,
only that, character subjectivity is not there. Now, we should be, by all logic, we should be very close to this Mohanlal character. We should be able to see whatever he sees. Like if you take Vertigo or Rear Window, if you take
yeah.
subjectivity in Vertigo or Rear Window, please, whoever wants to make POV films, please listen to this. If you take the Rear Window or Vertigo, we only see things from one perspective, right? Just to deduce what is happening elsewhere, right? James Stewart is the perspective. We have deduced from various things and gradually revealed. Here, that is not the case. Whatever he does initially in the film to protect his family, like burying that body under in the building and all that, though we are close to him, we are not shown that. That is information which we should have been made privy to, which you are not shown. You understand my point? Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is that even Malayalam movies, art films, all of them have messages by and large. By and large. Okay. If you want to talk about something like subjectivity, I would point out to something like Adur Gopalakrishnan's Anantaram, where half the movie is 1 minute, I'll answer your question. Half the movie is told from the viewpoint of one character or from a single character. You don't see everything. So there again, he is disputing the notion of truth. He is trying to talk about subjectivity. I mean, even Arvind did this, Ray did this at certain points. Gatak is doing it in various. It's slightly complex. I won't go into that. But by and large, you look at Benegal, you look at all these other people. The basic thing is omniscient camera eye. Art cinema is basically omniscient. Even your Mrinal Sen would be omniscient camera eye. There would never be subjectivity in that sense. Okay, something may be concealed from you, but it's not point of view. Okay, it's not subjectivity. Okay. Now, any other questions? I'll take questions from now.
Yeah. There's a question. So, do you think this orally
1 minute
inscribed? Yeah.
before, I mean, you also look at an Indian movie. I suggest some early Indian movies from the 20s. I thought Light of Asia, called Prem Sanyas in Hindi.
Yeah. The light of Asia.
Yeah, you can have a look at it, see that also. Light of Asia. Only thing is made by a German director. The scriptwriter was Indian, Niranjan Paul, but the filmmaker was a German called Franz Osten. But you have a look at some of these early movies and you see what. Don't look at the latest movies; it will probably confuse you. But anybody has questions, I'll answer questions.
Yeah, we have a question. We have two questions actually. Do you think this orally inscribed epic narratives of cinema catering to larger group of audience sometimes result in marginalizing and exoticizing some culture, people, or group?
Exoticizing usually happens when you are addressing a public outside your own. No, Iranians do this. Like for example, many of the they try to hold up their own culture through. Like for example, we want to put it across this exoticization means You're treating your own, whatever, your own backyard as somebody as man, showing it to foreigners. That is what exoticization is. Usually, this oral thing doesn't do that. It's more the art cinema which does that, in my opinion. Because oral culture addressing people are already familiar, right? All of it is to these messages which you hear in Indian cinema are familiar messages. They already know what you're saying because they are the sayings of wise men. They are from Ramayana, Mahabharata, or they are well-known social truisms. Okay, they are not unfamiliar things. But when you start showing these things to international audiences in film festivals, then you try to exoticize what you're doing, show them as something very exotic means to show it as foreign. No? That's what I understand my point. Is that okay with
Yeah.
you? Is the answer okay?
Yeah.
You can't, like for example, Salman Khan's film is hardly the kind of thing which is going to exoticize anything. At least it's not going to exotic unless you're showing the foreign nation as exotic. Well, like Bharat may do to your individual, to you. It's not called exoticization. You will show it to your own. Okay, thank you. Right.
Yeah. And there's a question from Dharani. She says that Rajnikant did Mulam Malaram, Aril Iruntu, and Aruvatu Varai. So I'm not sure if I'm
I can't,
pronouncing
I
it right,
can't, I
but
can't see these
like,
things. I can't answer. As I said, I can't answer these things of. You will have to look at it in the light of what I am saying, whether I am saying is true or not. Then you can always. All the what I have said is all part of published stuff. Now the question about cinema is there are no truths in film theory, right? It's all speculation. Whatever I'm telling you is what I speculated. It has gone through some procedure. It has gone through some. What is the way? It has gone through some kind of vetting by peer review and that sort of thing. They're not truths in that way. It's not a truth like hydrogen plus oxygen equals water. It's not a truth like that. Okay. They are all basically speculative and they are all basically subject to falsification. They are subject to, you can come up with something that you'll be entitled to. You have to go through the process and produce something, that's all. So if you don't agree with me, you're entitled not to agree with me because I can't really claim that what I'm saying is the truth. Your Palke claimed that whatever he is showing was the truth, but I can't claim that about what I'm saying. I've only claimed it as speculation, that's all, okay? It's some kind of speculation to help you think, see if what I'm saying is right, if I'm saying is wrong, okay? If you don't agree with what I'm saying, fine, but the point is, my suggestion is that you look at it and say, why is it wrong, what is this? Whatever I'm saying, usually if you look at it closely, I'm pretty sure of this. Your Dera bin Laden definitely, Dera bin Laden will definitely I'll be able to explain it next week. Okay.
right.
So what the message of that film is, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to. I've not seen the movie.
Yeah, see, the message
Yeah,
is basically that,
I'll
yeah,
explain
they're
this
asking
movie.
for a
Yeah.
ceasefire. Like, stop making
I
war.
know, I know.
That's the message.
The
Yeah.
story, when you tell the story, you can tell it in any way, right?
Yeah.
The point is that, right? You tell the story to make your point. I'll tell the story in a different way to make you see my point, right? And the point is that story you're telling me in a certain way. I'll have a look at the film whether the story is that what you're telling me is correct or not.
Okay,
Tell
sir.
me something at the back, some particular thing. Yeah, please. Yeah,
Of
okay.
course. So with this, we come to
Yeah, thank you.
the end of this today's session. So thank you so much, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you.